was very optimistic about people coming to finance.
Well, I know, we keep talking about, you really need to come to finance, really need to come to finance.
Stars.
We're on 3 out of 5.
Okay.
We just can't take any, well, I think we probably can take a vote if we needed to.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to our rescheduled Finance Committee meeting from September 9th, 2025. Call to order with introduction of board members, starting with Jeff.
Jeff Henley.
Molly Rogers.
Becky Fless. Administrative staff.
Katie Gould, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
Dave Dostey, Facilities Director.
Terry McGuire, Director of Technology.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Go ahead. All right.
Nope, you're good.
So I'm going to ask that we modify the agenda to move item B, this Yavi modular lease discussion, all the way to the end.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody have an issue with that? Then so rearranged. Excellent.
So the first item on the agenda, and I'm just going to let Katie chime in as need be, as well as Gabe, is the State of Maine Revolving Renovation Fund. So the State of Maine has opened its revolving renovation funds for school districts to apply. They have stipulated the following priorities. Priority 1 is issues related to health, safety, and compliance issues, including roof structural upgrades, improvements to indoor air quality, compliance with ADA, hazardous material abatement or removal, and other health and safety compliance issues. Priority 2 is repairs and improvements not related to health, safety, and compliance. Priority 3 is repairs and improvements related to energy and water conservation. Priority 4 is upgrades of learning spaces. And priority 5 is other projects. So schools apply to have their project approved. The state has not indicated how much they have available. The way that it works is the fund provides loans to the SAU, to school districts, and the portion of the loan is considered a grant and is forgiveness. The forgiveness rate ranges between 30% to 70% and is based on the percentage of state subsidy paid to the local SAU. So in our case, in this year, the state paid 66.15% of our subsidy. That can be found on the ED 279. The remaining balance of the loan is paid back either over 5 or 10 years at a 0% interest rate. And then the repayments back into the revolving renovation fund projects for future years. So we've been talking about this behind the scenes, most recently today with Gabe and Katie and EMC, it's not emergency, Energy Management Consultants. I just call them EMC, so I apologize. We have dusted off the project that they just did for us and that we shelved, and we looked to see if some of these projects might fit. It might be a good way for us to get some of our projects funded. We talked specifically about projects at the high school, knowing that there may be conversations about consolidation that we want to entertain. And if we involve ourselves in one of these projects and we have a consolidated school, removing ourselves from this has proven to be difficult, as we have found out when we closed TC Hamlin School. We spent a lot of money on attorney's fees. So we're looking at limiting this just to the high school. What I did not say is that each school unit that they're funding, there's a $2 million cap.
Oh, really?
Yep, so it's not more than 2 million. So I'm gonna ask, Katie, do you have anything that you wanna add?
I do not.
Okay. Gabe, do you wanna talk about the projects that we identified or they identified today?
Sure. So like Andrea said, we looked at the high school. The projects at the high school would be the projects that were for ventilation. So which falls right into the ventilation, health and safety of the facility. So the cafeteria right now has no ventilation or air exchange in it at all. So that would be one of the sections. The library has minimal ventilation in it. And the other section of the building would be the C-wing portion of it, which has the 64 5-year-old unit ventilators that are in there that have never been upgraded, which would be a huge piece if we upgraded those. They would be able to put CO2 controls in them, and again, help with controlling the air quality in that building, which is a huge issue. The other portion was when we looked at the drainage around the front to address the drainage and the drainage issues. We feel we'd be able to put that in there too as part of the project to look at fixing the drainage, which will help the water not come into the, under the slab, into the building and infiltrate up through, which again is a mold, mildew issue and air quality. So that's really where we looked at for grouping those projects together. And like Andrea said, those all do fall under a priority one, and there's a $2 million cap that we'd have. We wouldn't be able to scope anything over that for a project.
So they have everything they need to apply. The application deadline is October 31st. So there's a timeline on the state website. It says the SAU deadline, again, is the October 31st. On November 28th, the state will start reviewing in their rating process. They expect notification. The final priority list will be established by June 15th. And just because we've put an application in does not mean that we're required to move forward with a project. We can look at what they're willing to fund. We were talking about what happened last year, that basically all of their funding went to one school district. So it really depends on how many other school districts applies during the same rating period. So we are asking your permission to submit that application, or for ECM to pull that application together and to submit it so that we're at least under consideration.
Do you know or anticipate that that would exceed $2 million, the two items you've listed? Because can I ask that you maximize the number of projects
Yeah, so
so that it's
absolutely.
limited, but
Yeah.
so that then we can pick and choose which ones?
Yeah, we didn't really talk numbers there again. They have all the paperwork because they did all the work for us last year. So they have those numbers. It's a matter of them compiling them and putting them together. The other thing we did talk about is potential taking care of some of the ADA issues in entrances, bathrooms, those sort of things. And and they scope that out as part of their package that they already did also. So potentially they can look at that.
Didn't they say that each project would be a separate? Did he say it
It's
like,
the priority.
oh, that's
So
right.
priority
So
one
priority
can't be
one
over
would be
200.
the ventilation and the ADA.
ADA.
Yeah.
There are things in priority two. So priority two, they may be able to put something in with that, but the state will pick all the priority ones first. The last time we did that was with the catwalk at the high school, and that actually fell as a category 2 project, so that's why it never made the cut. But there's a potential. It's just we really wanna maximize our short period of time to make sure we can see if we can get the application in for as many priority ones as we can.
And we can look at, once they fund us, maybe we look at what the annual payment will be, and maybe we don't wanna, last year was a difficult budget year. I don't know what this year will look like. You know, maybe based on the size of the loan payment, that we may not do it all. We may choose to do just this or that, but that would be a decision the board would be able to make after we've been notified in January. After that, we have 30 days to move forward with the funding from the main bond bank. So there is a timeline. So anyway,
Did you say the funding the state covers 66% of this? Whatever we might get for an award. So we'd be responsible for the other. So if it was a $2 million, we'd be responsible for 30.
Right. Which, as Andrea said, that's where the 0% loan, correct? So for that amount that is not funded through the state as a grant, then we can borrow that money 0% for 5 to 10 years.
Right.
the good news is now we're approaching a time when it may be more favorable lending conditions based on what the Fed is looking to do. So maybe January, things will even look better than they do now. Do we need a motion to move forward with submitting? Or a show of hands or something?
Would anyone feel like they'd like to make a motion to move forward?
Yeah, I would move to, I make a motion to, is it just
Submit.
Move forward
We're
with the
submitting
application.
an application or
Yeah.
submit an application?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And a
I'll
second.
second that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. All those in favor? Thank you. Alrighty.
So the next topic of conversation, it's really more of an FYI. I just didn't want the committee to think that decisions were being made about paid family medical leave without conversation. So if you remember, last year, the state of Maine started to develop paid family medical leave and started requiring school districts to pay into that, school districts and employees rather, to start paying into that, I want to call it a kitty, but into that pool beginning January 1st. So the caveat to that was those employees who were in a collective bargaining agreement back in October 25th, 2023, those individuals do not have to start contributing, nor do we have to contribute on their behalf until their collective bargaining agreement expired. So there are some people here who are not under collective bargaining agreements, like Katie and I now, and some of our other positions upstairs. So we've been paying on those individuals since January. The custodian unit, their collective bargaining agreement that was in effect at that time expired on June 30th, and we've been paying in for them, beginning July 1st. And then food service and bus drivers and ed techs, their agreements expired on 8/31. So starting with the first check that we've just issued, we've been paying in for them. However, teachers, which is where the lion's share of our payroll is, their agreement does not expire until next August. So which means we have another year of not having to contribute, or they don't have to contribute as well, rather. So when this came into place, there was a lot of conversations with a lot of players about looking at private paid family medical leave companies, and several of them have reached out. MSMA has one who we deal with for our workers' comp, and for our dental, and for our unemployment. The caveat with that is for those who choose to go in their private pool, we would have needed to have started paying contributions before we would have otherwise had to, because of the collective bargaining agreement expiring. So we would have had to have started their contributions in the summer as opposed to in September. The difference in rates range between, so we're required to pay $1, or 1%. It's split half and half. The private plans, the percentage that's been quoted has been 98, 95, 85, 92. It didn't warrant having a conversation and moving to a private plan and locking ourselves in and being required to pay before we would have otherwise had to. So I wanted to just let you know.
3 years, right? Locking ourselves in
Yep,
for 3
so
years.
the law requires that if you're in a private plan, that once you're in for 3 years, whether you like it or not. We can revisit this conversation moving forward. At least it will give us a chance to see how those private plans are working for some others. Not everybody is going to a private plan. There's additional work that needs to be done in our offices as opposed to having the state do them, because now it's being pushed down as opposed to the state taking, I don't know if I'm saying this right. So there's additional work required in the central office for administration of those plans, as opposed to the state just handling it. So I'm, again, very curious to see how those will work out, and how it works, the amount of additional work it creates in the central offices, and whether it's worth losing or getting a discount of 0.02%. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that it's on our radar. This has all been unfolding. It's been unfolding over the past year. It was unfolding in the spring, and there wasn't really a lot of time to make decisions. However, knowing that our teachers bargaining unit, their CBA didn't expire till August 31st, 2026, it did not make sense for us to pay the largest chunk of our salary before we were obligated to.
Well done.
So we're covering that cost now, right?
So, I'm sorry, Jeff, I didn't hear your question.
The school district's covering the teachers' portion of it.
The teachers, we're not having to pay in for the teacher. We won't have to pay for the teachers until September 1st of 2026. If we enrolled with a private plan,
Oh, yeah.
we would have had to start making contributions a few months prior.
But we're not paying in at all.
No, because
How did-
we hung
How
tight.
did we get off hook? Because of the agreement?
Because they were, when the law came effect, we had these CBAs, they were in process. And basically it said that those employees are exempt until their CBA expires. So they've kind of fallen off one by one.
Are they exempt from the benefits as well?
The benefits, yes, so you don't get them until you pay in, but nobody's getting benefits now. They're not rolling out till next spring anyway.
Right.
Mhm. So basically the state is collecting funds, and then they'll be rolling out the benefits later.
Okay.
Right, and the teachers are receiving the benefit that's in their
In their
bargaining
contract.
agreement.
Yeah, I understand that, but then not the state
Correct.
mandated.
No,
Yeah.
the teachers in their contract have sick time and then they, all of them, have the sick leave bank.
That's right, yeah.
Yep, so
And earned
we've
paid
had,
leave.
and,
And earned paid leave.
and earned paid leave, yep,
Right.
so. But anyway, I'm just putting it on your radar, I just wanted you to be aware.
Thank you. That was a really a great description of a complicated sort of process.
I appreciate that. The next conversation that we're going to have is about federal funds. So I think when we left things last spring, there was a lot of disruption in our talks about what was going to happen with our federal funds. Angela covered the ECEA grants in her curriculum meeting on September 9th. Basically, all of our funds have been restored one way or the other. So Angela talked about the funds they got. We got the funds with Title II that we at one point didn't think we were going to get. We were worried about having to cover a class size reduction teacher. But the real reason that let me back up just half a second. So Angela covered everything. It was covered on her September 9th curriculum meeting. If anyone is curious to hear her conversation, I would recommend watching that video. I am talking to you about local entitlement, which is the second half of our of our federal funds, sorry. And what I wanted to bring to your attention, which is because of another state law, which is the law that went into effect requiring, school districts to pay 125% of minimum wage for ed techs and 115% of support staff. This has really changed our local entitlement. Basically, in our local entitlement, as a reminder, local entitlement is special ed money. We use it to fund ed techs. That is all that it is being used for. We only use it to fund ed tech ones because when you pay for main PERS covered individuals under a grant, basically the match out of that grant it ranges between 23 and 25%. So in order to maximize this grant, we're only paying employees covered under Social Security. As a reminder, Ed Tech ones are not covered under main PERS. Not all of our staff members are covered under main PERS. Basically, main PERS are teachers, most administrators, with the exception of Gabe and I and a few others. Obviously, I mentioned teachers, Ed Techs 2s and Ed Tech 3s. And that's pretty much it. There's other people who have optional membership, basically subs, but everyone else is Social Security. So to circle back around, local entitlement, special ed tech ones, we pay Social Security, and I'm getting off track. So the reason that I'm bringing this to you is because of the state, the new law. I don't know if it was law, if it was just built into. Jeff, what is it called when the governor includes something in the budget that it automatically passes? I don't know if it was passed that way or if it was passed by the legislature, but we're now required to pay 125% of minimum wage. It's pretty bad. I asked him a question. I didn't even let him answer it.
It's a rule change.
Thank you.
They have the
Thank you.
authority to make rule changes without legislative
Okay.
approval.
So basically, the amount that we're paying ed techs is increasing, starting ed tech 1, step 1, has to increase by more than $2 an hour. And it's creating a huge problem with our local entitlement funding. So in the budget, for the staff that we have, the budget for those employees is $724,000 or $730,000. Our grant award for local entitlement this year was $578,784, leaving a deficit of $155,000. The good news, however, is that we have funds left over from the FY 25. I have, or we have, it's not mine, we have 171,000 remaining to cover the deficit, provided that Sarah gets all of those positions. However, we are going to have a problem when we start budgeting. We're going to have to move some of those ed techs into the local budget, and this is my way of giving you a heads up,
Right.
okay?
Is this, will it affect? When you have a wage bump, the
Yeah.
people above,
Yep.
they wanna feel that wage bump. So I mean,
We have not settled those negotiations. They've continued. This legislation that the state has passed has put us in a real pickle, because you're right, the ed tech ones that are the lowest, they're the ones we have to bring up, right? The rest of them pretty much were at the threshold, but you know, it's when you are part of a bargaining unit, there are expectations that when wages increase for this one, that, so we're working on that. We're hoping to
We're
settle
hoping.
this soon.
Very soon.
And they're being very gentle about it. There's
They
nobody
are.
that's being, there's no fist pumping or anything like that to get what they
the
want.
reality is that sooner or later, you run out of milk, the cows. You can only milk so much.
And the problem is that we've just received notification that the minimum wage is going up again in FY 26. So the state is creating part of our budget issues by passing legislation. I understand what they're trying to do, but it's making it very difficult on our end.
You know, the minimum wage is automatic every January 1st. They don't have to vote on it anymore. It's part of a.
Yep.
Oh, God.
But it's making it difficult to agree to wages.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal thing is you repeal that law, so you stop doing this.
So we're looking at the wage proposals that we gave to the association, making sure that they're in line with what the new 125% of minimum wage, so that we're not running into a mid-year adjustment, right? The problem that we have right now is that those collective bargaining agreements are not settled. And as a result, what usually happens when a contract is not settled, anybody who would earn, who's been here half a year, who would earn a step, is graduated to the next step. However, on the wage scale, there were several steps that were well below the 1832. I had to make all of those 1832 until such time we're settled, and then we will have to go and make things right once they're settled. So we will do retroactive adjustments, but that's what we did in order to get through this, because we're now required to comply with the 125% of this
Scale,
year's
yeah.
minimum wage. Sorry. I don't know why I'm apologizing, but I'm
Well, no,
sorry.
and it's a mystery why they picked ed tech ones of all.
Mm.
The whole thing's mysterious.
Okay.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
So,
Bye, Gabe.
bye Gabe, thank you.
Go Tigers.
So I'm trying to drag my feet. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion about the annual financial audit. So we're halfway through. Our audit's divided into two parts. We basically split apart our audit services years ago. So Hank comes in and does a pre-audit, and he prepares the financial statements, and then the actual auditor does the audit portion of it. So they work hand in hand. We're not paying any more than we would if we had a single somebody doing it on their own, which is what we had for years. With the exception of an issue that we found with the student activity accounts, everything is looking really good. the auditor, Eric Nato, part of, I want to say Micho Nato. They've got like 4 names, and it's newer, but I don't have the entire name. We've been in conversation, we've started testing, but we wanted to bring to your attention that something has come up, and we'll talk about it more in executive session with a full board. As a result of what has come up, we've made some changes to our student activity account procedures and have tightened things up. We had procedures in place before. We've put additional procedures in. I don't know if I talk about those procedures or do I wait, because
I think we could take questions. There are implications for personnel with a building-based procedural sort of error. So I want to be mindful of that, and that's the reason and the request for the executive session with the full board, but we certainly wanted it to be on your radar that we had this
Okay,
come up.
yeah, so part of it, I tripped across the issue in June. I tripped across the issue in June and started asking questions. I brought the issue to Katie. Yeah, it was to you.
Early on, yeah.
Yep. And to Hank, who was here, Hank, and we discussed it, and we discussed the protocols that would be in place, the new protocols in place. I just got off the phone with Eric and letting him know what I had found and how we were dealing with the issue, and letting him know that we have put, again, new protocols in place. We talked about his disbursement testing. I don't know what else.
I think you've covered the big points until we can delve into it in executive session.
Okay.
During that conversation, while Hank was here over the summer, taking a look through everything, he was able to articulate clearly and with emphasis that Andrea's record has been meticulous, and that it spoke volumes from his perspective as an auditor consultant, that an internal mechanism actually identified the problem, which may or may not have been sort of revealed through the audit process. So I think I just wanted to be able to recognize Andrea for that.
I appreciate that.
It's not something.
I know this is a challenging conversation because you take your job seriously. We have procedures in place for a reason, and
We do. And I take pride in having an audit without any comments, without any findings. I don't know how this is going to, while what happened didn't occur in the business office, because the audit encompasses all of the district's funds and funds that we are the custodians of, which are student activity accounts. It is brought into the audit, which is why I thought, Katie and I discussed this in great length. We both agreed it was important for us to share. I wanted to be upfront in case he tripped on it. Actually, I just wanted to be upfront because that's who we are.
Right.
Anyway, that's all I have to say, I guess, this time.
yeah.
Sorry.
we'll finish it in executive session.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We will do that.
The next item on the agenda is I'm going to take you on a trip about the general fund appropriation to the high school graduating class, and something that also came up during our audit discussions. So years ago, and I can't tell you how many years ago, the board used to pay for transportation for the senior class to go to Funtown Splashtown,
Oh, right, yeah.
right? So the board used to just not charge the senior class for the transportation to take those buses down there. It was the board's contribution to the class. I'm not sure if when it happened, but at some point they decided to move away from the Funtown Splashtown. And the principal at that time came to the board and asked if the board would be willing to continue the contribution. So the contribution that was towards project graduation.
Mhm.
So the contribution amount that I budget every year is $3,960. So that actually goes in your budget, and every year, provided that the senior class raises as much money, we issue a check from the district budget to the high school student activity account to cover what used to cover project graduation. At some point, that stopped as well. They are no longer doing project graduation. They are doing something, I don't know what they are calling it.
Right.
But it came to our attention that funds are being spent in a way that the board may not be aware of, that it is no longer going to project graduation. Instead, they're buying,
Swag bags.
thank you, they're buying swag bags for seniors
And prizes.
and prizes, and they brought in food trucks. And there's a lot of things and gift cards. Did I mention gift cards? Gift cards is one of those things that is a big audit no-no, and we're probably going to have to, I shouldn't say we're going to have to address it. Part of another conversation in the redoing of the student activity account is to put an immediate stop to gift cards until we can get our heads around it. Auditors don't like gift cards for a lot of reasons. They travel like cash. It's hard to identify. Typically, what we've required students to do is to sign off that they've received a gift card. The sign-off procedures really haven't been good, at least not in keeping with audit standards. So we've kind of put a kibosh to that. But we're bringing the conversation back to you for two reasons. One, to make you aware, to make the board aware of how the funds are being used, and to let you know that there's a policy in place, a board policy that isn't really being followed. So we're just, we're letting you know, and we're going to talk about how we're going to move forward. So the board has a policy called DFF. It's called Student Activity Funds. And basically, it says the senior class is allowed to decide how to disperse the remaining funds in its account after graduation. And what we've always made sure of is that they've raised the money, it's theirs, but it's our responsibility to make sure that someone's not getting a check in their name and one person's not going out. So before we transfer the funds, we require that they have a bank account set up and that it's in a few of the class officers' names so that there isn't one person with access. That has not been happening. Instead, they have basically, I don't know how to say, they've asked the graduating class in a poll, but it's also included with a lot of other things. Do you just want to give these monies to the graduating class for next year's graduating class, which really isn't an appropriate way of determining what happens to the funds. But the board policy says that if the class doesn't make, doesn't make plans for those funds, that basically once they sit there after the year, the monies have to come back to the district. So I was watching last year's student funds and all of a sudden they disappeared. And what I found out is that this year's class basically gave their funds to next year's class, which is, I do not believe that is in following with with the intentions of the board. So there's a lot here to unpack.
Yeah, I would just ask, it's unclear if that has been a practice, kind of an off-the-record practice, but it doesn't reflect the way our policy is written, and so therefore it requires a conversation.
And Pat and I had talked about it before we left. She also recommended that this practice not be continued. Because what's happening is who is ever giving their funds to the following class is basically hiding how much that class has raised. So then they're meeting the match for the board funds. So it's basically, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, sorry, Becky, go
Oh, no,
ahead.
so it's interesting because I had never really thought about it the way you've just explained it, but now something makes sense. It's been in my head for several years. And that is that, yes, absolutely, the one class. I think it might even be sold to that class that way, that you raise money for the next class. And that's, so I think that there's more investigating that needs to happen, because I have asked my own kids, how does that work? Don't you raise money for your class? Well, no, we're raising money for the next class.
So
that doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
so student activity funds are basically belong to the students that raise the funds, which is
Yeah.
why,
Which
like,
makes sense.
when they're sitting in a school, student activity fund, they are to be used for students. However, within that fund so just so that you know, we can see the student activity accounts in our office. It's part of our accounting procedures, which is why I caught what I caught as our earlier conversation. And I just lost my thought. Anyway, so the system upstairs will allow you, while all the funds are in one checking account, if you ever look at the quarterly reports that I send you, like it will show the high school and it will show soccer and basketball and baseball. The system has a way of segregating funds by activity, which is what this does. And I forgot why I was going down this. Oh, so, sorry. So if the nested within that, the only exception would be if his administration had like a jeans day and they had a separate fund nested within that. We call them sunshine funds or staff funds. So if they had funds within that overall student activity fund, obviously those funds would be able to use by staff, but otherwise the funds really belong to the students. And nobody should be shifting funds around without approval from an advisor, or, you know, if funds are raised for a field trip and the field trip gets canceled, then technically the funds should be reimbursed for the students whose money or parents paid in for a field trip and it didn't happen, it should be refunded. There's a lot of making sure that monies are spent for the students who raise the funds and for only that club. So, you know, the soccer team shouldn't be buying, the baseball teams. I mean, not that this is going on, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Right.
So we're trying to make sure that everyone has benefit from the funds they raise. Anyway.
And that everyone has that same information, that they understand that that's
So
what they're
in
doing.
response to your question,
Yeah.
this year's class should not be raising funds for next year's graduating class. So the conversation that I want you to be aware of is that the board is making an appropriation to the high school senior class. And we want to make you aware of how those funds are being used and whether the board wants to continue with that appropriation to the class. And if you'd like to put additional guidance on how those funds are used. I think we're also going to, I think letting you know that we're going to close that loop and not let those funds just be donated from one class to the next,
Yeah.
I guess. Sorry, that was confusing.
So, is each class raising funds the moment they become a freshman?
Aren't they?
Katie, why don't you share the conversation that we had with regarding the struggle that we're having with kids getting, so it used to be,
I can't remember the conversation.
so
That's
you're
why I'm
fine.
looking at you
No.
puzzled.
So it used to be that every class had a class advisor and they would be responsible, but we no longer have class advisors in that way. So no. It is becoming more difficult for classes to raise funds. Kids do not want to do, they're struggling to get kids to do car washes and to do all the things that we used to do when we were seniors, like, right? So, and without an advisor, it is even, the advisor stipends were repurposed for something else. Now, instead of having 4 class advisors, instead you have, you have a prom advisor, and then you have, a prom advisor, and then you have a graduating, like the person who does the senior activities, they receive stipends, and the other stipends have been repurposed for either another club or activity. So we were discussing how difficult it was getting kids to want to fundraise for their graduating class, and then before they know it, their senior year is here.
Right. Well, I guess that's where I'm struggling a little bit with not allowing the funds to be passed down because they've been fundraising collectively for 4 years, so they do have ownership in those funds.
I think they're struggling with that.
This is the first time hearing that we don't have like class advisors.
Right.
And I mean, it's a whole new structure than what I'm familiar with.
Right.
We
But
haven't had them for years. At some point, somebody came to the board and put a plan in front of you repurposing those. I mean, that decision wasn't made. It's part of
yeah.
the teacher's contract, so those stipends were repurposed to something else. I don't remember what specifically. It seems like it's been quite a few years that we haven't had class advisors. But it's been a struggle getting kids to raise funds, and with nobody heading,
Yeah.
there's no advisor. I mean, you obviously have other advisors for the student council, and they all raise money for their own reasons, but not the classes themselves. So anyway.
I do wonder if this idea of project graduation and the big trip lost its luster for kids. Times have changed, and then it's not like, come on, guys, we gotta get the Funtown trip or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever the goal is.
Right.
So there was optimism around this idea of a block party, the swag bag. There was a good turnout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was told that someone had shared personally with me, because I attended the block party. It was a community event. It was well attended. But someone had shared with me that evening that they said there always used to be a trip and students stopped going on the trip, but we were committing these funds for a trip. And so I agree, we shouldn't be committing the funds for a trip, but I don't think I think they're also doing a great community event, so.
I agree. I think that maybe it's just one of those things that started happening and never really got addressed or talked about. But they haven't done like the.
It sounds like something that we need to end this.
And
As far as the board committing money to this. We should, sounds like you're not getting good accountability of what the money's going in. And it's being moved all around. You said you're kind of. It's maybe the best way out of it sometimes is just to stop doing it and say, if you do want us to reissue this program, come and discuss with us exactly what you're gonna do. In other words, justify the money every year. come to us, justify it. It sounds like you can't track it well, you're having trouble following the money.
Our system tracks every single deposit and every single expenditure.
I mean, it's not getting used for the original purpose.
And that is the reason for bringing this back to you, to letting you know that things have changed. I wasn't aware of, I mean, I knew that they were no longer going to fund Town Splash Town. I just assumed that whatever was going on was like a project graduation. I was surprised when I heard that it's not really project graduation, that it's the block party with the swag bags. We are going to have to rethink things that are in those swag bags, specifically the gift cards. I don't know if that will change once they're told, and they have been told that the gift cards are no longer an option.
Right.
No, is that not, I mean, there's other things to encourage student activity and involvement, is to say, you know, a matching, the school board will match the money you raise up to a certain point. That might be a way of generating student interest and accountability for the money. Because if they're not using it for a trip, then we shouldn't be offering it to them, because that's what it was for. Bring it back, maybe set up a new program. Like say, it would be good to get the kids involved in raising money, bottle drives, whatever it takes. And maybe the idea is we'll match their funds, whatever they raise, we'll match it.
I just can't help but feel like we kind of tied their hands if we went ahead and reappropriated their advisor funds and then took away their advisors, so they couldn't really get organized to have class fundraisers any longer. I think there's just a number of factors and changes that have happened over time that I don't know that we can come up with a solution just sitting here around a table, but maybe hearing what it is they need or want and considering
Yeah.
the
We're not
accountability
gonna solve
for
it
it.
tonight.
Well,
Yeah.
and maybe that's it. Maybe Katie putting it back on the board for a board discussion and having Lauren come with a solid proposal of how the funds, and then the board can decide at the board level, because you're right, it's really not a finance thing, it's more of a board thing.
I see it the same way, Andrea. I was thinking along the same lines. It's two parts, really. We have the, does the board want to continue to commit these funds? And is there a step that we built in, let's say winter, and the senior class has been fundraising, in theory, has this amount of money in their account, and they, you know, through Lauren or a student representative presents, this is our hope, our vision for our graduation celebration this year. We have raised this much. We are requesting that money that the board, if the board continues to want to set this money aside for that purpose, and maybe that's that it's not an automatic push into student activities.
Right.
And then we're not clear how much goes to this year's class and how much gets gifted to next year's. That might be a way to tighten it up.
I think that's
So
a good
one,
thing,
what
yeah.
does the board decide? And then again, we're looking, and this has already been happening since June, at the procedural clarity around the procedures
Right.
and the accountability, because it's a lot to track.
And I would suggest that if one class bequeaths the remaining funds to the next year, then it reduces the amount that the board pays the following year.
Oh, yeah.
So if the class of 2024 gives the class of 2025 $2,000, then the school board will make them whole with their original, you know, and make up what paid $1,960. So that might be a consideration. So that way, I don't like the donation from one class to the others. And I honestly don't know that the kids
It's just
know
not
what they're
clear.
voting for
Right.
when they choose to. It's kind of bundled in with some other things. So if that's how, maybe we just change the policy. Maybe we change policy that says if there are remaining funds, then the class has the option of gifting to the following class. But if they do so, the board's
The board's contribution would change.
mhm.
And I'd be curious how many board members even know that we make a
I don't
contribution.
think they
Right.
do.
So we need to be pretty clear about
Right.
that. It could be like the volleyball
Mhm.
Right, I don't think
Or the
we should
sport.
strictly be
ticket taking.
funding it over and over and over
Right.
again,
Mhm.
essentially being the carry forward fund.
If it's not getting spent for the purpose it was designed, We should pull it back. I mean,
Yeah.
either spend it or lose it.
And while I understand your thinking, Molly, about it's money generated from our community for the purpose of students, and so I can see, I can see that. But again, we want to be, it makes me feel better that it's coming back to the district, it's coming back to the board to be purposed as seen fit, right? To,
Yeah.
and that's altogether different than a gift that is not tracked. Yeah.
And maybe part of that conversation is reinstating maybe a class advisor to help raise funds. Now, I'm never in favor of, I shouldn't say never. I'm usually not in favor of creating additional stipends or clubs because it always ends up adding to the budget. But if we're struggling, and maybe that's something that Lauren can touch upon, that if we're struggling to get, they need to have somebody behind them to help raise the money, and if there aren't advisors, then who? You know, maybe that needs to be part of that whole conversation. Sorry.
Well, and I think that's another area where the board is just unaware of changes that happen because we're not in the buildings and we're not, we don't participate in that at that level.
Right.
And so, yes, we manage the money, but it's kind of an overview of the money. Okay, in that way. And I don't want to take anything away from kids. I guess I think, you know, if they don't have a mechanism in place right now to help them to raise money for a project grad or a block party or whatever sort of celebration, if they don't have anyone helping them, I don't want to just take it away from them.
But I
want to
do-
find a way.
But I do agree that the match, I don't think, in my opinion, that the match should be based on what we've talked about, the appropriation from, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, they need, from where I said, what I want to say is they need to have some skin in the game. They-
Absolutely.
You know,
If they
it's
raise
their,
$500,
it's
They
their
can get
party, you
$500,
know,
right.
exactly.
And I
Yep.
guess I thought that was happening all along.
So anyway.
Yeah,
thank you, it's good information.
it is good information. It's one more thing we need to pay attention to.
It's a lot of information.
Mhm.
Sometimes. Sorry, I was trying to stall, waiting for Jeff before we start the next conversation.
Sorry for the delay.
No apology necessary, but I just didn't want you to miss part of it.
On that, were you suggesting, do we need to take a look at that policy?
I think it depends on, I think you're going to amend the policy depending upon what comes out of the conversation with Lauren.
Okay.
But if they don't, you know, we can, but it's policy, what did I, DFF?
Mhm.
Student activity funds. Yep, that will be a follow-up.
Great.
Ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. So the last item on the agenda is the Skiavi conversation. So I'm going to unpack a lot, and at some point I'm going to ask that the finance committee members entertain going into an executive session to have a conversation with its attorney by phone.
Okay.
But I'm going to try to unpack as much as I possibly can in open session, and then we'll talk with Jeff Papiano, and then we can come and continue the conversation on the other side. So as a refresher, back in 2018, when we closed TC Hamlin, we brought in a modular to Pittston, and we have been leasing that modular monthly payments for $5,075 every month. It comes out to a little bit over $60,000 a year. So in the past few years, the state of Maine has a lease space that they will reimburse us through the ED 279 for part of those funds. However, that only lasts for 5 years. So I think last year or the year before, I gave you a heads up and said, hey, guess what? We're no longer going to get funded, or we're not longer going to be, I don't even know what the word is, reimbursed, sure, that's a good word. By this, even though it's not a reimbursement, it just flows through our funding, for our loan, for our lease purchase of the portable. As a reminder, there are 2 portables at Pittston. One of them is the one that I'm talking about. The other portable is a portable that we bought during, with Easter monies, and there's another one that we bought with Easter monies at Helen Thompson. So those are not the 2 portables that I'm referring to. I'm referring to the portable that was put in place in 2018. So based on the conversation that we had, with the finance committee and or the board, I think it was a combination of both. We decided, that we were going to look into purchasing this modular, because it made sense to, rather than to continuing making payments, that we would see how much they would charge us to purchase. So if you remember, the spring or last winter, we started the process. I reached out to Schiavi, and they gave us a purchase price of $286,350 to purchase the modular that was there. We actually went out to, or I went out to Gorham Leasing, which is now called something else. The financing was in place. They issued the check. I was getting ready to send the check. I had reached out to Schiavi and I said, I need an invoice. All I have is this quote that I was given from them. And all of a sudden, the brakes came screeching on. We can't sell this to you. Things have changed within the corporation. We are no longer at liberty to sell this. And basically, what ended up happening is our lawyers, the check that we had was returned to Gorham Leasing. That lease was closed. We had to pay a month's interest on the lease. And we've kind of been engaging in conversation with the attorneys since, because basically there was a contract by email that was reached between us and them, and then they changed the terms. So Jeff Papiano and I have been talking, if you remember back in May or June, we had a conversation, an executive session that he was going to get, we decided the way that we were going to move forward is he was going to get an assessment of the property or evaluation of the property. And then that was supposed to happen over the summer. He reached out to 3 or 4 people who do assessments of homes. They don't, unlike homes, these modulars do not increase in value, they decrease. It's kind of like a car, right? So he couldn't find anybody, but that's part of our conversation. So the other part of our conversation, Jeff was under the impression that our lease was expiring in November of this year. And there was a 60-day clause that we need to let them know whether or not we wish to continue the lease agreement. So we needed to exercise within 60 days whether we were going to continue to lease or whether we were going to buy. And I've struggled with connecting with Jeff over the summer. Things have been crazy. And we finally got together, and I said, I have a finance meeting. I need to give them an update. We need to reach out to Schiavi. We're approaching the deadline to let them know. So he reached out to them, and their attorney made him realize that the lease actually does not expire until 2026. Okay. However, it did precipitate another conversation, a conversation that's just starting to evolve. That started to evolve this morning. So in response to that conversation, we got an offer to buy from them, or an offer that they were going to sell. And their offer is this. that we confirmed today that we've received the offer, and Jeff confirmed that it was received. And that the full payment would need to be made in full by September 29th. And that they are asking for a total sum of $311,725. So in context, last November, when we were talking about purchasing the modular, the purchase price was $286,350, right? And we've been making $5,000 payments every month in good faith. So Jeff and I started unpacking this. We started to talk about what might happen. And so the conversation goes like this. If we wait until the lease expires, they are under no obligation at that time to sell it to us. Which means that if we ride the lease out to the end, that technically they could come and get the modular, and then we'd be left without 4 classrooms at Pittston. Which is something we need those classrooms. We don't have enough space in the school to accommodate those 4 classrooms. So we don't want that to happen. So the conversation that we've had with Jeff is, what are we going to do? So for context, during COVID, we bought a modular of a similar size for Helen Thompson School. The size of the modular that we're discussing is, I want to say 84 by 64. The modular that we purchased at Helen Thompson was actually 8264, and the purchase price during COVID was $542,150. So the conversation is the board willing to entertain a purchase price of $311,000? Or do we want to renege the offer, not knowing what's going to happen when the lease expires, knowing that it may have to go out and purchase a new modular for the tunes of $542,000 3 years ago, COVID. So at this point, I am going to ask the board to hear from the attorney. He's going to probably talk about some of the same things that I just talked about.
Andrea,
I'm sorry.
what is the month that it expires? June?
It actually
2026?
expires in November 2026, but there is a 60-day notification
So we would need to let them know 60 days before.
next year.
Next year.
And what Jeff will tell you, and we talked about extensively this afternoon, is that they're under no obligation to do anything when the lease expires. So the question is, that leaves us in an unknown situation.
So they're under no obligation, meaning that the lease ends, so it just sits there and we do nothing?
So the lease ends, we would be required to, basically the lease agreement says that we need to restore it. So if we did anything to it, and then we would have to pay to transport it back. Basically, the transportation is our requirement for a modular that may or may not have any value to
Right.
them.
Right.
It all depends. I don't know how they will feel about it at the end of their lease next year. So I am going to ask, Katie has,
Yep, I have the language. We'll need a motion to go into executive session. We have reason because we're getting legal counsel to go into executive session.
will you do me a favor and will you either put it in front of
Yes.
Becky, the specific,
Yep. I think
so that she can reference the specific
Yeah.
MRSA, sorry.
So are we ready to do that now?
If we have a motion in a second, if not, we just won't go into executive session.
I'd like to make a motion to go into an executive session to consider the lease
page.
agreement that we have with Skiavi, and to have a conversation with their attorney pursuant to MRSA subsection 405(6)(e).
Second.
All those in favor?
Terry, will you please stop the video and the audio, please? I have no problem with Terry
We are now out of executive session and there is no action being taken.
And I think that's the end of
That's it.
the agenda.
Motion to adjourn? Not
So moved.
necessary, but sure. Yes. Okay.
6:42.
42. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here tonight. Yep. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
You have to. We don't move to adjourn.
Ladies, we'll see you again.
Thank you so
soon.
much, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
The good questions.
Um,
I thought committee ones we had to.